Hello, spectacular entrepreneur, and welcome to another episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast. This is episode number 412, which means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/412. In today's episode, I'm going to walk you through what makes for great market research for online business and also dispel some of those myths about what market research needs to involve and how yucky it is so that you can understand how powerful market research can be and also have some depth to your understanding of what it needs to do and how you might go about it. So let's dive into today's episode and make sure you keep note of that episode number and the link for the show notes because I have a great free resource for you today as well. It's at tashcorbin.com/412. Let's dive in. I'm Tash Corbin and this is the Heart Centered Business Podcast. I would pretty confidently guess that at this stage of life, you've likely experienced being part of someone else's market research multiple times. So whether you've had someone ask you a couple of questions as you walk past them in a shopping mall, or you've had someone ring you and ask you just 3 really quick questions for our market research, or you've filled in a long, unwieldy survey for some company that you subscribe to their mailing list. Oh, shout out to the airlines. They always seem to ask the longest surveys and with the weirdest questions anyway. Or maybe you have answered someone's question on social media or an email. I would say that most people have participated in multiple forms of market research, giving their insights over their lifetime. But unfortunately, if you have participated in that, it's likely you've also experienced some of the worst possible parts of being part of market research, where you've answered someone's question on social media and then immediately realize they're just using it to bait you into having a conversation with them because they're trying to sell you something. Or you've said yes to doing a research interview with someone and they only ask you one tiny question, then all of a sudden they're like full on trying to help fix something that you didn't ask them to fix. Or maybe you've been interrupted at dinner time by that phone call and they say they just have that one question that they want to ask so that they can understand how they can help save the rainforest or save the koalas or save the babies or whatever they're trying to save. And they tell you just this one simple question and that will really help us to save humanity. And then 30 minutes later, you're still on the phone to them. You can't get them off the phone. You feel rude and you don't want to hang up on them, but your gorgeous vegetarian lasagna is going cold and it looks real gross. Is that just me? But just because we've experienced one of those horrible experiences participating in someone's market research where we feel like we've been misled or we've been lured in doesn't mean that all market research is bad. And it doesn't mean that market research isn't one of the most valuable things that you can do, particularly in the online business space, to maximize the effectiveness of your marketing strategy and your messaging as you move forward in your business. I don't want us to write off market research as being something that those dodgy people do, and we're not going to engage in it because we're not willing to do that to people. Because it doesn't have to be lure and misleading kind of thing. It doesn't have to be a bait and switch. It can be something that's highly connecting. It can be something that's really helpful to the people helping you as well as to you as a business owner. And it can be a fabulous opportunity for you to really move your business forward quickly. So when we think about market research through the lens of, well, what is it doing for us as business owners and why would we engage in market research? I think one of the best things to focus on is great messaging, right? When you think about great messaging that you've heard or you've read or you've seen online, it's super resonant, right? Great messaging speaks to us. It speaks to our heart, or it speaks to a secret desire we might have. it speaks to our lived experiences, or great messaging can sometimes really help us to make sense of our existence or of a problem that we're facing or of a goal that we have and we can't seem to achieve it. Great messaging is really effective when it feels like you really know me. You know me so well. Sometimes I read people's content and I feel like you know me better than I know myself. And people say that to me a lot as well. And that amazing, resonant messaging that reflects our lived experiences, that seems to know us more than we know ourselves, is often the result of really effective market research, real understanding of what the audience desires, what they are struggling with, what barriers are in the way, why those barriers seem to be so tricky for us, right? When we have that depth of understanding of our audience and we combine that with an understanding that's very tangible about lived experiences, it's a very practical, very day-to-day, teeny tiny experiences, story-based reflection of what's going on for us, that's when that messaging really shines through, right? That's what I think of as some of the best, most effective, most resonant content in my own business, but also that I've ever seen online. Well, in order for our messaging to be able to reflect that depth and to speak to that depth and speak to the tangible factors, the things that go on, the little secret worries or the little secret desires that we have, or the frustrating things that we do each day that we can't understand why we keep doing it to ourselves, right? In order for that messaging to really do its job, to really resonate, to really reflect what's going on for your audience and particularly for your niched audience, then our market research needs to effectively source those insights. So when you think about what is great market research for an online business owner, it's research that gets you those insights, that tells you that story, that speaks about that lived experience, that generates that depth of understanding. That way, you can craft messaging that gives actual insight, and you can reflect what's going on for that person, even when they think no one saw. And that resonant messaging is really powerful, right? That's where people say to me things like, Tash, I feel like you were peeking in my windows last night. I'm like, no, I just know you really well because I listen and I observe and I watch and I ask questions and I'm curious about who you are. So a saying or phrase that came up in a version of the Client Attraction Challenge that I ran in 2023 was be a student of the human, right? And that is something that I think I do very well. When I think about my market research has never been done through the lens of what question can I ask so that I can write 16 blog posts tomorrow, right? No. Yes, that's the ultimate, like that is an end goal of something that comes out of my market research. But I don't do my market research through that lens. It's just something that I can create when I do great market research. I always create market research approaches and conduct my market research through the lens of how can I understand this human more comprehensively? How can I be a student of the human that I am trying to reach and connect with my content? How can I be a student of their day-to-day experience, a student of their dreams, their goals, their ideas, their frustrations, their challenges, their experiences, what's happened in the past, what they're hoping to do in the future? I want to really understand them. Great market research comes from that lens. It's not, how can I ask a question that gets the most answers, so therefore I get the most engagement, so therefore I reach the most of my ideal clients? That kind of market research might work for one cheap ego-driven result, i.e. a number of people you've reached or a number of people who've engaged. But does that actually get you any closer to sharing deeply resonant messaging? does that actually get you any closer to deeply understanding the experiences of your ideal clients so that you can better support them and help them to move forward? No. So my number one piece of advice when it comes to creating market research strategies for your business is to be a student of the human. So whether you're crafting a survey that your audience can fill in, or you're asking open-ended questions on email or socials or at the end of your Facebook Lives or whatever it might be, whether you're conducting interviews of individuals in your audience so that you can get that depth of understanding, in all of those different strategies, ask yourself, how can I be a student of the human? How can I be curious about this person's experience, existence, dreams, goals, challenges, all of those pieces? How can I look at this through all of those angles so I can get that depth of understanding of who this person is, what it is that they want, what it is that they're wanting to achieve, what's getting in the way, how does it show up? What have they tried before, right? Like all of those questions are going to help me deepen my understanding. Now, of course, the more specific you are when you pick the niche and the human that you want to be a student of, the more tangible, resonant, and effective that messaging can be, i.e., this is why we niche. Also, the more effectively you understand where that insight that market research gives you belongs in your messaging ecosystem, the more effectively that messaging can do its job as well. So if that's something you're interested in, I will pop a link to my core messaging template in the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/412, because that will then help you to understand, like, where does that go, right? What do you do with that insight that you get from that market research? So we'll make sure that we link to that in the show notes of today's episode for you. But if you already got that clear, right? If you already have a really strong messaging ecosystem and you have a good content strategy and all that kind of stuff, but you're looking for more depth or you're looking for more connection and resonance with what you put in there, then just focus on that being a student of the human, really studying that person's existence and their goals, like through all of those angles as much as possible. But as I said, the more specific and more niched and narrow you get, the more insightful that market research will be. So make sure that you go and check out my show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/412, and I'll pop the link to that core messaging template. If you are still in like, oh, my niche is keeping it really broad because I want to help everyone, in that core messaging free resource, there is also a link to my niching training and stuff in there as well. So it will take you through what you need in order to be able to fill it in. So I'll just link to that with the show notes of today's episode. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to market research in this podcast episode is what market research then gives you as a business owner beyond that amazing messaging. And one of the things that I love about doing market research is the connection that it can create with your exact ideal client. So if you're doing market research interviews, for example, and you share, I'm doing market research interviews and I want to talk to people who fit this criteria, and then people say, oh, I fit that criteria, I can help you. Now, a short-sighted churn and burn marketer would go, oh, you're in my niche, you're my ideal client, therefore I don't need to ask you any questions, I just want to sell you something, right? And I've seen people use that strategy before. Terrible, very short-sighted, doesn't actually add any value, and it doesn't get you the insights that you're looking for. So you've sacrificed the messaging insights for the sake of having the short-term goal of selling to them. But also you could have both. ¿Por qué no los dos, right? That's from the old El Paso taco ad. I don't actually speak Spanish, sorry. I always say, ¿por qué no los dos? It's a little girl who's their family's trying to decide between hard and soft tacos, and she is like a genius. She's like, why can't we have both? That's what they say it means in the subtitles. I don't know if that's correct, but I just know that line off by heart. Anyway, so when it comes to doing market research, you can actually connect with people who are in your niche and who are potential ideal clients and get those insights. But The secret to having both is using consent-based approaches. And when I say consent-based approaches, I mean don't say you're doing market research to inform your content strategy for the next 12 months and then simply lure people onto a call, ask them some surface level questions and then start selling to them. That's not consent-based. That's not what they said yes to. Instead, I want you to think about what would make it a win for both of you, regardless of whether they purchased or not. And then be upfront about what that is. So, for example, in the Takeoff program, we do a market research interview process where we actually do interviews one-on-one with people who are within your niche. But we do it in a way that whether the person buys from you or not, the interview and the thank you gift mean that you have gained a bunch of amazing messaging insight for your business, and the interviewee has gained moving forward on their journey and getting closer to their goal and actually like achieving some things, and you've helped them. And it gives you the opportunity to practice your qualifying questions, i.e., starting to qualify and understand whether they would benefit from progressing to the next step and gauging their interest and excitement and enthusiasm for continuing the conversation about how you might work together. And if that person is excited and interested in getting further help with that, then they get access to that and they get the opportunity to hear about that from you. So it's like, it's a win, win, win for you, win for them, win for you, win for them. And it's just one interview and free gift process. Like, it's so powerful. But the reason why it's so effective and it does such a great job is because it's built on a consent-based approach. And actually, in previous years, I've actually seen people who've joined the Takeoff program, done my avatar interview process in my market research interview process in the Takeoff program and got clients out of it following my step-by-step process. Then they have misunderstood or misinterpreted why it is such an amazing and valuable and powerful process, because they got clients out of it when they followed my steps, right? Then they go, oh, wow, well, I could shortcut this process to this and this and this, and I still would get my ideal clients jumping on it, and I could still do the sales pitch to them, and I could still da-da-da. And then they go out and teach the process, but it's actually not the consent-based win version of the process that I've taught them. They've actually tried to like shortcut the process, or they've not understood the core consent-based principles underneath the process. They've just tried to steal it and go and teach it to other people, and it doesn't work as effectively with other people. And then they're like, but it worked for me. And it's so fascinating to see. People don't understand why it's so powerful. It's powerful because it creates connection with consent. And it is a win for both people regardless of whether they buy from you or not. And that is where people get very short-sighted and they get all excited about, oh, if I do market research, I'm going to make sales. Therefore, how can I shortcut my way to market research equals sales? And then they skip the whole thing. Anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. But I just wanted to really circle back to this like sense of if whatever you choose to do for market research. And by the way, if you are looking for some more practical strategies on how to do market research, I have a training about this coming out in the next few weeks after this podcast is released. So keep an eye out for that in your inbox if you're on my mailing list, or on socials if you follow me over there. But whatever it is that you choose to do, whether it's interviews or making form-based surveys or asking questions on your socials, always look at it through the lens of consent. So another example of this is where people ask questions on social media, but they ask it through the lens or guise of being market research, but they're just using it as fishing with a PH, right? They're just using it to fish. A great example of that is someone was teaching people to come into the heart-centered community, and it's fine, we don't allow phishing questions anymore. We've wised up to this, so we don't do this anymore. But someone was teaching people to come into the heart-centered community specifically, and let's say they were a dating coach for single women. They were teaching them to come into the Heart Center community and ask a question. For example, I'm doing some market research. So single women, could you tell me what's your favorite thing about being single? And so, of course, being the most amazing community on the internet, the heart-centered community, all the single women in the group were like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to help you. And they'd give really well thought out answers. And they were thought that they were helping this person because they were doing market research so they could create content. So they thought, because that's what they were told, and they clearly believed them, they thought that they were helping that person with content. So they were putting lots of energy and effort into it, only to discover that that person would then slide straight into their DMs or friend request them and say, thank you so much, your help was amazing. And then 3 weeks later, try and slide into their DMs and sell to them. And all that person was doing, they didn't care what the answer was. They just wanted to come into the Heart Centered group and say, hey, who's a single woman in this group? But because they're not allowed to do that, and that's obvious, and people wouldn't answer if they just did it like that, they tricked people into answering and outing themselves as a single woman in the group. That is not consent-based. If you were going to slide into the DMs of someone and sell them da-da-da, in consent-based marketing practice, you would in that post say, hey everyone, I am looking to create some content to help single women, and I'm a dating coach for single women, and so that I can have some informed content, but also for anyone who answers, I will send you a DM on how I could help you to jump into dating and da-da-da-da. Here's my question. If they asked it honestly and openly, people wouldn't answer. So does that justify luring and tricking people into answering the question? I would argue, no, it doesn't, because it's not consent-based. Does that mean, though, that you can't just ask open-ended questions on social media to help inform your market research? That also doesn't mean that. So you'll have seen me asking questions on social media. I'll say, I'm creating podcast episodes for the next few weeks, and I'm focusing on messaging and market research. So what questions do you have for me about messaging and market research, and what do you wish I would teach? I take those answers, people give me those well thought out answers, and I actually use them to inform podcast episodes. I use it to inform the webinars that I'm creating. I use it to inform the freebies that I'm building. I use it to inform my content on socials, right? So I actually use the content in the way that I said I would use their answers. I don't use that as an excuse to now slide into their DMs to sell to them. But because I've asked that question and I've got that insight from people, when I do create subsequent content and podcast episodes and all that kind of stuff, it resonates far more effectively with my audience, and it attracts more audience who are within that same space. And so I don't need to slide into all of those people's DMs and sell to them. Instead, I can just thank them for being so considered in their answers. I can let them know how helpful it was. If I need to ask follow-up questions, I can ask permission to ask follow-up questions if I need to, right? Because I'm not coming at this through the lens of there's only so many leads in the world and I have a scarcity mindset about every opportunity is an opportunity to sell. Always be closing, ABCs of selling, always be closing, always be closing. Because I'm not that kind of salesperson, I know that this is just the beginning, right? If someone answers a question like that on my socials, number one, it's helped me. It's been really helpful. And I want to reciprocate and be helpful to them by then honoring their insight or their question or whatever it is and answering it. Now, if I can answer it for them straight away because the podcast episode's not coming out for 6 weeks, I might offer to do that. I might say, oh my gosh, that is such a great question, and I will definitely do a podcast on that. Do you want me to send you my short, sharp answer now? Right? Or do you want me to tell you my short, sharp answer now? And so in the comments, or sometimes just in the comments, I'll say, yes, I'm definitely making this into a podcast episode, but I already know a little bit about your business, XYZ person who may have answered, because it's usually my warmest audience who answers. So I'll say, I'm totally going to do a podcast episode on this because this is such a great question. But also, because I know a bit about your business, here's what I recommend for you specifically. And I give them some actual personal business advice, right? Now, that person gets double win, double value add, having answered my question. I don't have to slide into their DMs uninvited. I can just give them that free advice there in the comments, Or if I've got something that might help, I can ask for their permission, consent-based marketing, right? So just because it could be valuable to me to have identified them as a potential lead for my business doesn't mean I then have to treat them as a lead, right? We're not at that stage of our connection yet. That wasn't the context in which I asked the question. And it's not consent-based for me to then use that information to then just hard pitch sell them and like agitate their current state and like tell them that they're silly for not having figured it out or argue with them on the internet, anything like that, right? That's where I think a lot of people misunderstand the purpose of market research and also like the level of relationship you've just built with that person. And consent-based practice means that if you're not sure, you can ask. And that's the powerful part of this, is that if you're not 100% sure that someone is enthusiastically keen to continue this conversation, you can just ask. That's the whole point. Anyway, I want to make sure that this podcast episode doesn't become an hour-long one, like one last week and the week before. So I will finish it up there by saying market research for online business is powerful and amazing. The two biggest benefits you'll get is, number one, your messaging will be far more resonant. And number two, you will be able to build more connection with your existing and new audience members in a really powerful and relationship building way, so long as you do it with consent-based practice. If you are wanting to know how to translate that research or the insight that you get from your market research into messaging, make sure you come and grab the freebie at tashcorbin.com/412. But also in going through that free resource, you'll be able to see what information you need. So it will also help you to ask better questions and inform the way that you ask questions to get that information and those insights as well. So I'll put all the links to that with the show notes, tashcorbin.com/412. And also, as I did quickly mention, I will be doing a free training coming up soon on how to conduct market research in a way that grows your business and builds connection, all those sorts of things. So make sure you keep an eye out for that one. And if you're not on my mailing list, going and grabbing that free resource with the show notes will add you to my mailing list, so then you won't miss out on that as well. But feel free to get in touch with us and ask to go on the mailing list if you're not sure, or grab any of the free resources with any of the podcast episodes that I've shared in the last 412 episodes. That'll get you on my mailing list and then you won't miss it. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. And I look forward to seeing your market research online because, of course, I'm going to be watching. Bye for now. Would you like more tips, tools, and resources to help you grow your heart-centered business? Head to tashcorbin.com today.